Right, I think we're all sorted. Thank you very much for taking 2 hours out of your busy days to sort of listen to some of our thoughts from the UK. It's really brilliant from my point of view because I can understand what's happening in your market as well. And I hope as I go through this presentation, if there's questions, shout, ask me. I want to hear from you if you're having similar problems, opportunities. And if I talk too fast, because I do, Sarah's going to do this at the back of the room and slow me down. So do tell me if there's something that you want me to clarify as I go through things. So we're going to look a little bit at the UK consumer, what's happening in the economy and whether people are going to be spending money on holidays. We're going to look at media trends and social media trends. We're going to touch on search and data protection because that's changing a lot in the UK. And then I'm just going to give you some examples of some marketing activity that's happening in the UK. And as we go, I'll talk about what other tourist boards are doing, just so that we can see how things are, how people are developing in different ways. So first, consumer trends. It's been a strange time in the UK, I think it's fair to say, the last 2 years. And we have a fragile economy, like many economies in the world. I think everyone predicted terrible things after the Brexit announcement. It's not been as bad as people expected. The floor didn't fall out of the economy. People carried on spending money. Good news. But we're weak. We're in a fragile situation. There we go. So although it's a low economy, just go back. Yeah. So although it's a fragile economy, inflation is low, unemployment's quite low, so that the core economy isn't as bad as you might expect, ignoring what's been happening in the world. And where am I pointing this to make this work? And there have been some signs of confidence. Everybody's frightened because we don't know what the future holds, what's going to happen post-Brexit to the economy. But it looks like there's slow, steady growth. We probably won't grow as much as we would have done if we stayed within Europe, but the predictions are between 1 and 1.8% growth in GDP. So stable, not spectacular, but not catastrophic, which is reassuring. There we go. But consumers are concerned. If you look at this slide, you can see this is a slide showing consumer confidence and how it's changed over the last few months. And you can see it's going down because when Brexit first was announced, there was shock. There was an expectation the world would collapse. It didn't. The world continued. But now all the politicians are having their very public debates to try and plan an exit for Brexit, and it's causing confusion and concern, both from consumers and from the business community who don't know how they'll be regulated, what passport controls may need to change. There are so many questions. It's causing this trend in consumer confidence. And that's also happening at a time when the exchange rates have obviously had a terrible impact on how much things cost for Brits. So it costs us a third more to come to Europe now than it did before. That's expensive. That's made a big difference. This summer, people were coming back and talking about how expensive it was in Europe compared to what it's been in the past. And you can see that graph on the left shows the exchange rate and how the problems with the exchange rate. So we can't underestimate that. People are talking about that. And that means people are travelling less. They are changing their travel habits. They are either going on a 10-day holiday rather than a 14-day holiday. They might be going for an all-inclusive holiday so that they don't spend as much. And they are continuing to be fearful. So it's not an easy picture for travel. People are still travelling, but we've got to be aware they might be thinking in a different mindset. So the stories we create need to be aware of that attitude and that concern. And you can see that figure on the left. The forecast is consumer sentiment will continue to go down. We're expecting there to be a very difficult year as all the politics continue, and people are still concerned about the future. Oh, was that you? So value is going to be a really important message in what we say and do. Now, oddly, I talked about the fact that people are talking about how expensive Europe is, but there's an opportunity to try and take some market share from long-haul holidays, which are obviously expensive, take a lot of time. So we have to look for the opportunity in this market situation as well. Maybe we can steal someone who would have gone to America, where the exchange rates are also a problem, and get them to come back to Europe. So we need to think creatively about who we're talking to and how we get them to come to Emilia-Romagna. And this is also all happening at a time of huge change in the population structure. As you can see from this slide, 43% of the British population is now under the age of 35. We know we have to talk to millennials in a new and different way. But those people in the UK are struggling financially. The Gen Y group, which is aged 20 to 35, our future travellers, can't have big debts from university. I didn't have to pay fees when I went to university. My children are. They find it very difficult to get on the property ladder. We have a very big culture of buying homes rather than renting homes. There are predictions that people will be 35 before they can buy their first home. So that's having a big impact. And it means that people are having children later, and it means that those children are staying at home for longer. So if you're a 30-year-old in Britain today having a child, when you're 60, your 30-year-old son or daughter may be still living at home. So the parents of the future are not going to be 50 plus with lots of money because they've still got their children and they're having to put money into looking after their children. So we have to think about how that's going to affect travel. For multi-family groups, maybe they will be travelling, maybe the parents will be running away from their children, she said, who has a 21-year-old. So all of these things are happening which are affecting the way people are thinking about the holidays they take, whether to travel with those 30-year-old children or send them away so they have a breathing space from them away from their homes. And the Gen Z child, the under 20s, are increasingly important. We know pester power exists, but these children are having an influence on their parents, where parents are deciding to take them on holiday. It's a bit difficult to see on this slide, but 65% of parents, this is an American slide, but just thought it was interesting, say that their children affect where they go on holiday. And particularly in an Instagram age, where the children want to post and show their friends where they are, I know my daughter continued her passion for surfing so she could show pictures of herself on Instagram. I'm sure that's the motivator. Claire, who works on our campaign with us, only went to Turkey because she wanted that iconic picture of the balloons behind her to show to her friends on her social posts. So people are being defined by how they portray themselves in social, and that means they're putting more pressure on their parents because they want to be seen to be doing interesting, exciting things. So the holiday is not just something that children want to do for fun. They want to do it to show off, to share what they're doing with their friends. So there's another layer of pressure. They have to know that where they're going is visually beautiful and they will look good in front of their friends, which is scary. But not everybody's under pressure, thank goodness. The 50 plus in the UK is generally more affluent, has more savings, is more confident, is looking at an early retirement, longer life. So with the health conditions and obviously improvement in medical conditions, people are planning to travel for longer. So the growth in the older grown-up gap year, and we're creating some research at the moment about gap life at the age of 50 plus, where people are taking a year off work and continuing to travel and going back to work. So that's a big growth thing from the UK. So it's not all bad, and a lot of my tourist board clients are targeting either the 50 plus or the younger audience, because although they can't afford a house, they don't want to just sit at home with their mum and dad all the time, so they're actually spending a lot of their money on travel. So again, it sounds bad, but there's an opportunity in there. They still need to be seen by their friends to be doing exciting things, and they can't sit around and wait for a house for the next 10 years, so they're spending their money traveling. And because people are concerned about money, they want to make sure they're going to the right place. Is the picture going to look right for my friends? They're spending a lot of time researching. Expedia produces some really useful reports. I'm sure you've seen them on media solutions, on trends and how people research. And this is UK specific. So this shows you how much time people spend when they're considering a holiday. And in the 45 days, one stat from this slide, in the 45 days before people book their holiday, they're visiting 18 sites in that week. I remember when I was doing some research into a driving holiday in Europe, I closed down all my windows and realised I had 40 websites open for one hotel booking for 2 nights. People are spending a lot of time, so that means we have to have the content online to answer the questions they're looking for, the reassurance they're looking for. And they're looking online. This at TGI is a rolling survey in the UK that asks questions of 2,000 people, so it's not the total population, but a representative sample. So yes, they're using search engines. Most people, if they're researching online, obviously start with search engines. Consumer reviews, they need to see that they trust the information they're being given. Tourism Board website, as you can see, is quite low down. 16% of this audience then touch on a Tourist Board website. But we actually want to get to people right up here with those reviews and in the search engine as quickly as we can. Sorry, I didn't realise you were... And I think it's also interesting that people are searching and booking in different ways. I think this information is really interesting. Young people are researching less online because they don't know enough to be able to know where to search necessarily. So they ask their friends, they ask their families, they might pick up the phone and talk to a travel agent.
Sorry,
or
I don't understand why they don't research online.
They do research online, but they want to talk to people about it first. So my 21-year-old daughter, my son said to me, where do I start? I want to book a holiday. So they're asking people for some advice because they've not done it by themselves before, or they want to make sure they're not wasting their money and getting some soundings. So STA, which is a youth travel tour operator in the UK, has shops all over the country in student universities, and they do big business for students who still need that reassurance of talking through. My first travel... So there are still traditional methods for young people. But the interesting thing is they actually research less than older people online. 52% of 25 to 34-year-olds in this survey started that research online. But only 10% book. So we need to, again, look at the older traveller. 70% are starting online, researching online, but they're more likely to book through a trade partner. So we've got to, again, think about how the different demographics are looking for content and then how we fulfill it. So if you're working with a tour operator, then it's probably going to be more likely that older group, unless it's a specialist youth brand, and making sure you've got the information in the right place to hit that consumer journey. So it's not straightforward. You assume that the millennials are all online, and they are. And they're researching a lot, as you saw from the Expedia slide, but they are talking to people. They are asking friends. probably on Snapchat, but they are talking to people. Yeah. So that's the UK and a snapshot of what's happening in the UK. Concern, caution, but people are still travelling, still wanting to spend money, and we just need to treat people differently. So what's happening to the media they consume? What's happening around their media consumption? I'm sure from your own personal experience you know that you're watching a lot more video and subscription and pay TV. Yes. So I thought I'd show you some context. This is Mintel research, which shows you that 6.4 billion value of sales from pay TV like Sky and other services. And their forecast by 2021, the middle forecast, in a good world, that's what they think it will be, 7.3 billion. And then they do a best case and worst case just so they hedge their options. But broadly, they're predicting growth forward. And subscription and on-demand TV, the Netflix generation, is also on the rise. So in 2011, only about 5% of people were getting their broadcast content from on-demand or subscriptions. Now it's almost half, just in that short period. So massive change in the way we get our broadcast. And I did this slide, could this augur the demise of a traditional TV? And then I understand you don't have a TV and you look at all your broadcast on your laptop. So there are, again, major changes in the way we think about this, because people sitting around the television set on a Saturday night all together as a family is changing. If they're in the same room, they're all on 3 or 4 devices and probably watching 3 programs at the same time. There's a lot of data on this slide, but I just wanted to highlight that how fast that's changing again for millennials. This statistic particularly from 2014 is that consumers aged 13 to 24 spent more time on free online video than they did watching television. So 11 hours of video, 8 hours of TV in a week. That was 2 years ago. I suspect that's massively, massively changed in that 2 years, and it's probably 2 hours of TV and 18 hours of video. And 2 days ago, there was a big call in the UK for parents to ban their children from Snapchat because it's so addictive. So there's a sort of a bit of a backlash in some quarters about it. And it's not just video. Actually, some mediums are doing very well. Print, books, which is digital and print, you'd think in this online world would be dying. But this is the Mintel forecast for the book industry, because the Kindle readers they're actually encouraging more sales of books because it's so easy. A quick click and you suddenly got the entire book series of a particular writer you like. So 2 million total value sales, or billion, up to 2.4 by 2022. So strong growth for book sales for the long reads. But it's not the same for newspapers. It's not the same for the media. I know you've probably heard this story for the last few years and from every market that print newspapers are in decline. So there are trends in print circulation in the UK, 2 million for 2016, averaging 1.5 million by 2021, worst case 1 million, which is half. And if you take that slide down, the natural conclusion is, what's going to happen by 2030? Are we actually going to have physical papers anymore?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Do you think that this trend, the cause of this trend is because we don't like to read in print, or because what we find in print version is not reliable anymore? Because if we read books in print,
Yes.
it's not a question of traditional way to read. It's a question of what we find in the newspaper.
I think people are still reading newspapers. It's just this is the tip of the iceberg about how people are now getting their news. People don't just want the Times. They want, well, I'll read the Times and CNN and BBC, and I'll see which bits of those news titles I want. We want everything curated for us rather than just relying on one brand, I think. So people are buying less, definitely. So almost half the population, well, half the population don't buy a paper at all. But we've also got free newspaper services that we use, so why should we pay for one when we're being handed one at the train station as we go into work every morning? I don't need to buy one, I'm being given one. And a quarter will buy a print newspaper on a regular basis, and 1 in 5, just when something important happened, like there's a major news incident and people want to read the detail of it and they trust those brands. So they're not necessarily picking up buying this, but they might be reading it on their laptop. So they've picked up the free paper on their way to work, then they get out their laptop or their tablet and they're reading it online, if it's not behind a paywall. This is again quite tiny, but you can see that this shows how people are accessing news online in the last 3 months through a Mintel survey of 2,000 people. And 63% of the audience checked the BBC site as a confident primary source of news, followed by some of the major online news sites like The Guardian, Observer, Sky News, Mail, Mail Online, Huffington Post. So yes, they are reading the news still, but they're just reading it a different way.
Sorry.
Hello.
Is it for free?
Some of it is for free.
Read the news, a piece of news on the website of The Guardian.
The Guardian is free at the moment, although every time you read the online site there's a begging letter like there is on Wikipedia saying please spend some money in return for this. So they're asking for voluntary contributions for the content. The Times is largely behind a paywall. The Telegraph has a 2-tier system where you can read some articles, but if you read too many, then they pop up a wall and say you can't read any more without paying for it now. So they're using a mixed model. I think the Times really missed a trick with their online platforms. Their online platforms are much smaller than their competitors, but they've got a really engaged, active audience behind that paywall because they've paid. They're on that website every day. They're much more brand loyal and they're much more engaged. And we've done some work with them, which I'll show you later, which has had fantastic response. So if you can get to that audience, it's great. So it's a mixed model. People are trying different things. And they're definitely reading newspapers online. And I thought this was really important to flag up. This shows you what people have done and how they find that newspaper content online. So yes, they go directly to a news website or a newsreader app, which I'll come on to in a moment. But also, 41% have gone on to a national newspaper because they've seen something interesting on social media. We were talking here last night about why you follow people on Twitter, and Claudia said, well, I like to inform myself and I find news and interesting things. So people are actually in social media seeing lots of information and using that to follow and go to the news websites. So they're not actively necessarily going to the Times website page or social page, but it's in their feed and then they're following it back to the papers. They also read the social media feeds of newspapers, 37%, or they read it in newsletters because a lot of the newspapers are now building databases and trying to send news actively to them. And newsreaders are having a big impact on news reading, so Apple News on your iPhone or some of the news-curated services. I tend to go to BBC, Apple News, and then individually follow links through social media rather than buy a paper on a daily basis. But I do buy papers at the weekend, all of them, so I can read everything. And it's going to be interesting where things like Facebook Insta articles, where you can read articles within Facebook rather than even going back to the newspaper website, is concerning for the newspapers in terms of making money from it, but great for us because it means that our coverage is being shown within people's social platforms. They don't have to leave, so they can just read it quickly while they're in that platform. And things like Facebook Watch, where they're effectively going to be launching a Netflix-style service, trialling in America at the moment, hopefully coming to Europe this year, is again going to be a game changer for how we consume programs. But as you can imagine, all this means newspaper advertising is in decline. You saw that graph of newspaper consumption, and this is newspaper advertising. So they're in a difficult position. They're trying to do something different. They've got massive potential, but the print, this is now the tip of the iceberg of their businesses. It's just the shop window. It's not the only thing they do. But the newspapers are defined by the Audited Bureau circulation figures, so which are published twice a year and tell us how bad the situation is and how their print circulation is in decline. And so some newspapers, Murdoch in December in Australia has pulled out of the ABC audited figures. So that's one way of handling it. I'm not going to tell you how bad my figures are because it's meaningless and it's giving everybody the wrong impression of newspapers because we're really big digitally and you're not reflecting that in your figures. So I'm not going to give you my figures anymore. It's one way of handling it. I think it's a bit Murdoch, but it's one way of handling it. Others are trying to do things differently and innovate with new content so it makes people buy them for a reason. So the Times newspaper, as an example, has launched a new luxury magazine that comes out on a regular basis. So they use that as something internal to try and make people buy that paper on a regular basis, bring in new audiences who are buying it for a reason. Beautiful, and a lot of the papers are now trying to craft separate sections of their site that appeal to different audiences, like a luxury audience. So Telegraph has a luxury section, which talks about watches, books, travel all together. The Times is doing the same thing across all of their titles at News International. There is a big campaign to get more luxury stories across the piece because that's where some of the advertising is coming from because they're a difficult to reach group. So they're innovating to try and be more niche. They're changing their sizes so that they become less expensive to print. If you may remember when these papers were much bigger and the Guardian Observer went to the Berliner style format, well, the Guardian Observer is doing it again. It's changing its shape, and later this month it's going to be much smaller. So they're trying to cut on print costs. They're reducing sizes. They're becoming free. So Metro, which is the paper that people are handed as they commute in the morning all over the country, is now bigger than the Sun and the Daily Mail. So because their business model is get scale, then you get the advertisers. Don't make the public pay for it because data is king and people will pay to reach those consumers. So I read the Metro every morning. Everybody reads the Metro every morning because it's there. And some are doing a combination of reducing print and increasing online. So just in October, Glamour magazine printing twice a year rather than monthly and putting its focus onto digital first news, which is what The Guardian did 5 years ago, not waiting for the news to appear in the magazine, but making sure you have a live, active campaign online. And, of course, they're building their online audiences. So the print, you saw the graph going down, and online, you see the graph going up massively. That's quite an old slide. I couldn't find a better one of that particular, of the newspaper print editions. But you see that The Guardian was around the billion mark and up there, growing much more quickly than The Independent and The Telegraph. And The Independent went digital only, first newspaper, no print edition at all, from 2016. It did then, as part of it, launch a tabloid format called, The Eye. But they actually have almost, I think personally, become too clickbait in the way that they handle their news. So I tend not to read The Independent because I'm annoyed by the way they write their articles. It's the worst type of 20 things you didn't know about cleaning rather than genuine newspaper. So I worry about The Independent. I think it's not the credible newspaper it was. It's become annoying in the way it's become like BuzzFeed. So I'm...
Sorry, what did you say? I didn't understand.
It's like... It's becoming like
short, very
it's becoming, yes, it's not becoming a news-focused organisation. It's becoming an organisation that writes headlines to get people to follow the link. It's called clickbait. So this is a really stupid headline like, why do people not get out of bed in the mornings, rather than a survey of, a survey by Oxford Economics has found that there's a business problem. It's become very tabloid, and it's all about the headline and getting people to follow the link. Now, every newspaper is obsessed by their website traffic, and if you go into the Telegraph offices in London, they're in a massive room with a big display board which shows what's happening on the website at any one time, with a rising and falling list of which are the main articles that are being watched, which are the main social channels that are active, the biggest trends across the whole website. So there's a growing graph with bubbles that show big activity in the sports team, and that's right in front of the news desk at any one time. And the Telegraph also, within the new newspaper, instead of the classic adverts, you can now buy native adverts online which look like editorial by any other name, but it's called a native advert. And in the Telegraph, they look at native content and see if that's growing and allow that to float up. And if it's doing well and it's generating a lot of traffic, then they'll move it in from the website to a more prominent position, because they'll respond to what consumers are reading because they want to drive more traffic. So your advertising can be pushed up editorially into more prominent positions if it's good enough to drive traffic. So it's a completely different way of working. And if you come to London, we can arrange for a small presentation in the Daily Telegraph offices, and you can see what I mean, in a room with a lovely window overlooking their offices, and you can see how they operate. It's a really good example of how it works. And as news becomes digital, it's no longer UK only. It's open to the world. And that means we've got to think differently about the titles. So I've just had this data from the Daily Telegraph, and I thought I'd share it with you. It's detailed, but you'll be able to see it better on the slides afterwards. These are the advertising monthly impressions across all Daily Telegraph channels around the world. Who's reading Daily Telegraph online? So yes, obviously the UK is massive, but look how many people in America are reading the Daily Telegraph. Look at how many people in Canada, Australia, India, Ireland, even Italy. It's down here. Those are advertising impressions rather than unique visitors, but still massive number of audience. So when you have a UK story, it's great because you need to think about how it's reaching your other markets. And I have a client, one tourist board client, that's looking at doing a global campaign through the Telegraph and then geo-targeting content around the world with them. So we need to think differently about the brands we're working with. And that's not just the main website, that's also travel. So these are the advertising impressions just around travel advertising in Telegraph. So again, UK, slightly different audience. UK, United States, Australia, Canada, Ireland, India, France. So we need to think differently about this global audience. And 3 of the top newspaper sites in the world are now British newspapers. That's the top 14. So you've got the Daily Mail, the Guardian, the Telegraph, top 3 newspaper websites. And you can see also New York Times is up here. So the New York Times is also influencing UK audiences. So if you've got a campaign in New York and it's something in the New York Times and we're doing social media in the UK for a client, we ask our clients, tell us what's happening in your other markets, because we might want to socialise that in the UK, because the UK consumer doesn't care if it's the New York Times or Condé Nast Traveller US. If it's a nice story, they'll want to read it. So we can use that content and share it in our social platform, saying great story here and highlighting great content elsewhere in the world. So we've all got to think slightly differently about how we use it and make sure we're sharing it, because great content should be shared with everyone if it's the right audience and the right story.
How much is due to the Queen?
What, these three pictures of the Queen? A sad amount, I'm afraid to say. I think the royal family has been very, and British video and TV companies have been very clever about using that. Yeah. I don't think there are many countries that would throw their queen out of a helicopter before the Olympics. I think the way that they've used the royal family has been quite clever. Yes, the Daily Mail, which is the biggest one, has what's called the column of shame. Have you heard this expression? The column of shame down the right-hand side, which is all the juicy gossip and the celebrity pictures, and Camilla wore this today, stupid stories, but you think, really? And end up, you go onto the site for one story and you end up being sucked into the column of shame and finding yourself reading something you really don't want to know about. So there's lots of structural implications for us as tourist boards. We've got to throw it up and make sure it puts more pressure on us all to communicate with each other. So I often say to my clients, I'm responsible for UK and Europe, but if you've got an American group of influencers going to Australia, for example, from one of my clients, tell me, because I can talk to them in social media, even though they're Americans, because they've got 50% of their audience are British. So don't just think of it as that audience. Tell me, because I want to use that content. I want it. I'm a kleptomaniac for content, and I want to use it for my work as well. Why do I have to send another group when actually you've got a group there that I can use their content? So I think we need to throw everything up and just think about how we can make the most of what... It's great because it means that everybody's work can help me with my clients in the UK as well. And there are some clients that are taking an extra level on their marketing and their content marketing and creating a global content marketing panel that then looks at how content, in a classic way you create a marketing strategy and then agree where it goes, but a global social content strategy or a digital content strategy with input from all the regions, but so it's not just a top-down approach, but a sort of conjoined approach. So you have regional representatives on a global content panel, and then everyone can create content for it. So there's lots of different ways of working. Brand USA has recently done a roster for global agencies around the world that can help them with influencer projects. So they've appointed 5 agencies, including ourselves, New York agency, one in China. So if they want an influencer project on top of what they're doing day to day and they want different thinking, they put out a tender. So it's just a roster. They put out a tender. We're one of 5 agencies that can compete for it. So people are just thinking differently and giving themselves the opportunity to get different thinking around their campaigns. So I said this was the tip of the iceberg. We've talked about websites mainly for newspapers, but newspapers are also changing what they do socially because they see that driving traffic back to them as well. If people are finding them in social, that's got to be really important to help them drive their traffic. So social is also really important for the media that we're talking to. In the past, 10 years ago, I would talk to a travel editor. Now, on a newspaper, I'll talk to a travel editor, the online travel editor, the social editor, the picture editor, the video editor. There's a whole series of people on one title that I now need to talk to because I can't assume that they talk to each other. And if I'm talking to a travel editor and he's got a journalist going, I might say, well, can we do some video work of that journalist for your video page? And can we do a recipe for the food page? And try and layer that content everywhere we can through the newspaper. So don't just do one thing, but try and build it and make it bigger. And share it socially. So the newspapers are now saying, and magazines, a magazine editor said to me the other week, I won't use a freelance writer unless they have a really active social channel, because I need them to promote my content, because I need my bosses to see my content going up really high on the website. So the individual editors want us to help them promote their content. So on a Saturday when a piece appears about Bologna, whatever it is, I'll often, from my own channels, sit there saying, oh, I've just gone out and bought the newspaper, include the editor's name, and it's brilliant, and take a picture of it, so they see I'm trying to get people to buy the newspaper and read the article. And I often get thank yous from journalists for doing that, because they want people to buy their paper and see their content. And I think we assume that they will all go off and do it themselves, but they need our help. In this world where we all can point to content, if we are helping them promote the content when their people might buy the paper as well on a Saturday morning, they love it. So we've got to think differently about how we help them socially. In the UK, there's a few slides here about scale. I think it's worth saying Facebook is still number one, the big boy in the UK. And social media does influence travel decisions. Again, from Expedia, 13% of online bookers, before they've decided where to go, use social media in their research booking process. I bet, this is a stat that's a year old, I bet that's bigger now. And the 31% figure at the top in blue is looking for travel pictures and videos. So again, in social, we all know video and images are important, but that's actually affecting people when they first start. And this little red line here, which is the 19%, looked for articles and blogs. So they are looking for content they can trust from other people to tell them where they might want to go. So in this world, our social media can help point people back to our content. They're not just using one platform, as we know. So yes, 70% there have used Facebook. They're also on Snapchat, Instagram, and others. And they're using it regularly, very regularly. I know there's a figure that people pick up their phone and touch it hundreds of times a day. Well, people are still using the social channels multiple times a day. The purple is people go onto it several times a day. So Facebook 54 times a day, Snapchat 47% use it multiple times a day. And what's important for us is now to know when our audience is using that stuff. Is it 9 o'clock at night once the children are in bed? If you're targeting an affluent businessman, then Saturday to Monday is the time to talk to them, because during the week they're focused on work, and if you want them to be thinking about leisure, you need content out at that time. So we're being that granular in the way that we put stories out, as are the media. So we need to be responding to that with them. We know that photos and images are important, and that's across all the platforms. So the usual sorts of things. The purple is people using images on social. And people source content from people they trust, including these guys, which is why it's so important that we use them and share what they do. They use it from family and friends, and they share stuff from news publishers and providers. And again, that's across all of the social channels. News publishers and providers are a content that people feel comfortable sharing. So if we've got an article in the Daily Telegraph that's then the people are sharing, it has more gravitas than if they share it directly from us. And people do it to be social. They do it to entertain their friends and followers. Oh, let's all go to Rimini next year. But there is a bit, as you know, there's a bit of disconnect about what they want brands to do in that space, because it's their friends. It's like a private room where they're talking to their friends. This room is a social room where we're all talking to each other. If someone marched in now and started saying, buy my garden furniture, we'd all think they were mad. And it's the same thing with brands in the social space. You've got to have that engaging content with them. You've got to understand what they want from you and deliver it at the right time. Just a few stats about UK and the social channels. Because of the way that Facebook's changing its algorithms, you can't guarantee it will be seen unless you pay, which is really frustrating, I know. But there are those 32 million UK users who log in, 72% log in daily, so still an audience to talk to. Instagram, massively growing, lots of travel brands loving it because of that visual lush imagery, although you can't directly say like my page. You have to obviously use that link at the top much more creatively. And combining Facebook and Instagram together is obviously really powerful. Twitter is doing surprisingly well. There were predictions that Twitter was dying, but it's actually doing surprisingly well. I think when there are major news events, people then flock back to it to find out what people are saying and sharing. 21 million UK users, a third logging in daily, so not to be underestimated. And new platforms like Musical.ly, which are coming up very fast that we just need to be aware of. I don't know if people have looked at this. It's definitely not my age profile. The default age to put in starts at the year 2000, which makes me feel very old. But there's already 100 million registrations. You can put challenges on Musical.ly like the DAB challenge, you know, when those strange things where you say, what are those children doing? So you can post up videos of yourselves doing challenges in Musical.ly, and it's a viral, engaging community. So these are the sites that we need to think about, how we can harness for the future, who's using them in our groups, can we do something creatively that then puts emphasis on the region. But it's still quality, not quantity, that counts, and I like this example that my digital team pulled together to show this. In the luxury space, Burberry and Louis Vuitton, loads and loads of content, no engagement. So it's all about the story. Content is king, still the same as ever. If you've got a good story, people will listen to it and engage with it. So Gucci, which does far less, gets much more response because what they do is right and well targeted. And it's easier said than done. And in this space, we this year have started a new service with a clever piece of software from a company we've bought in because they have this software called Travel Mapper 360. It's Mapper 360. It works on any type of brand. They can take, it's bigger than social media monitoring. They can take content like research from across the internet and drill down and create personas as you used to do with advertising. So if I show you an example, this was they analysed 966,000 British Airways followers, put them into these tribes because British Airways was launching a new route to America and they wanted to know who to talk to. Who will go on our new route to America here? So they analysed all their followers on Twitter, created these tribes to show their different interests. So it shows you they have a Brazilian audience, they have a worldwide audience, a family first audience, which is the black there, and then a US interest group. So they had 42,000 people in their Twitter followers who are interested in America. Then they can analyse those people down by their interests. So they know there's a young music fans group, there's a celebrity fashion interest group, and from that they then understand who those people are. They create an entire digital persona, what they like, the brands they like, the influencers who influence them, so we're not guessing, are these influencers genuinely influential? I can tell you that luxury vacationers who are interested in America follow XYZ, buy these brands. And it's the digital world, this is public information, but to mash it together is very complicated and they spend a lot of time. It's not just automated, there's a lot of work that goes into analysing it and researching it. And this is an example we did just because you can do it on anything, any subject. You could do it on a competitor. Yeah. You can do it anywhere. You can do it. We did it on Blog Lovin', the blog platform, to see the different tribes in Blog Lovin'. If we wanted to go for a particular group of beauty bloggers, because we were doing beauty in airports for Estee Lauder Travel Retail. So there are lots of different ways of doing this, and because it's global, I can go to them and say, I want you to analyse bankers in Russia for me, please. Come up with a persona for Russian bankers, and they can come up with a persona, a digital persona, and tell me who I should be targeting and what I should be saying. When I first saw it, I said it was magic. I love things like this. But I can send you more examples so you can see what they're doing. And we also use it to track insight. So we launched a report at World Travel Market, which we gave you a copy. I'll send you another digital copy, saying what are people talking about now for 2018? What holidays are they going to book? And there's a real consumer push to going back to places they've been to before this year, which I think is interesting. It reflects that uncertainty and caution that I talked about at the beginning. People are a bit nervous. So going back to places they've been to before is coming out really strongly as a message that we should be addressing this year. So if you've got a loyalty program, you've got databases of past customers, that's a really good place to start for marketing 2018 holidays, because people are being a bit sentimental about places they feel comfortable. And this all means, as I've said, we need to be thinking about how we do PR in a very different way. We, for lots of our clients, are now asking for Google Analytics so we can see the referral traffic from editorial. I'm not sure who does the website. Who runs the website?
They are listening from Bologna.
Ah.
Our colleagues from Bologna.
Colleagues from Bologna. If we can talk to you about having access to Google Analytics, we can go in and look at UK coverage where we've had a web link and then see what's been most successful. And what that means is you might have done a press trip 5 years ago. There's still a link on the Daily Telegraph coming to your website that's still driving traffic. And if it's popular, then I can go back to the Daily Telegraph, who want to promote, remember, want to have lots of coverage, get them to update it. So I don't even need to send someone. I can just get them to update it, put it higher in the website, and we've got another piece of coverage for just going back to what we've already done. So that's a really good way of making sure you can track the long-term value of your tourism investment in these trips. They don't go away. In the past, we look at a piece of paper and say, right, it appeared on Saturday, it was worth that much money, gone. It's not gone. It's still there. It's still driving traffic to you, and it's still giving you value. So we need to be able to track that and work out what's working. We can also look on the Telegraph website and say, 3,000 people shared that article in Facebook. So we don't just say how many people might have read it. We can actually see and track, have people read it and acted on it? So we can look at people's response to an article. If they've shared it in social media, a lot, we've done well. We've actually made somebody react to the content we've created. So PR can be a lot more factual about whether it's made a difference. Yes, people followed the link. Yes, people shared it socially. So we don't just have to look at the paper to say whether it's been worthwhile. And we're also, digital is improving. The services we use that look at the advertising value are improving. We tell you when we give you a piece of coverage, it was worth £500. But now we're being much cleverer. In the past, they used to say, right, that piece of coverage is worth that whole page. Now their services are saying it's worth that much in that page, so it's only worth £300. So it's becoming more realistic advertising values. I just wanted to touch on search, because the content we write that appears in websites has to answer the questions that people are looking for. If I'm starting my search in Google or Amazon, more people are starting their search for products in Amazon than they are in Google or YouTube. What content do I need to have in front of them if they're searching for foodie holidays this summer. How do I answer those questions? Not just as an SEO person trying to put in keywords, but how do I answer it in a natural way so my content pops up before anyone else's, so that we help your search as well as your web presence. And there are things that are affecting that. People are now searching with voice. So it's not just typing in, how do I find a foodie holiday this summer? It's Siri, what's happening, where can I find great food this summer? The language is different, it's conversational. So you can see how much voice searches are increasing. And we've all, I'm sure Alexa has been a Christmas present in Italy as much as it was in the UK. And every time someone on the radio says the word Alexa, they all get shouted at because it turns on Alexas all over the country. If you've got one in your kitchen and someone on the radio says Alexa, it wakes up and starts talking to you. And at the moment, people are happy to do voice searches in their own home or in their own car, not as much while they're out, but I think as people become more comfortable with voice search, you'll see people walking down the street saying, Siri, tell me how to get to, rather than Google Maps. When they're standing there with their phone trying to follow a map, they'll have someone telling them where to go. And the uses for voice commands from April, 21% use to get directions and travel. And that's obviously when you're going to the train station to go home. But it's going to happen. People are going to be starting to use voice search because my kids never type anything in. They're always talking to their gadgets or looking for videos. They don't want to read large screens of text. They want a picture, they want a voice to talk to them. And I just wanted to touch on security of data, because data, the information I share with anyone, is now big business because people can talk to me about it. There's a new European regulation coming in May called GDPR, which I'm not sure if you're aware of, but it's having a massive effect on what we can do in marketing terms. I just put this up. There's a new website which Google's published called Google My Activity. You can punch in your website, your email address, and it will show you what you've searched for. It will show you what it tells it know about you. You can go in and see your own private search history in Google. So last Monday I was going down to a ferry company, and at the same time I was having a problem with a journalist whose flight was cancelled. So at 6 o'clock in the morning I was looking for travel to Poole. So Google knows everything about me and keeps it, but you can see what it knows about you. For us as marketeers, the new laws are going to affect the way we can use that information. At the moment, the way we talk to journalists isn't affected because it's a business audience, but in the future, we may not have to ask them for permission to give you information about them. So I may need to say to a journalist, I'm going to introduce you to Sarah, but please can I have your permission to give her this information about you? So we write a little profile of them, and I give it to you without showing that to the journalist. Now I'm going to have to give it to the journalist to approve before I give it to you. If we have an event, we may need to have permission from the people attending the event that I can tell you who they are. It's crazy. It's going to be very complicated. Anyway, some examples of marketing just to show you what people are doing in the UK. So yes, people are, if you remember, people are worried, concerned, bit worried about the future, but still want to travel. So people are marketing by talking about value, really important. And it might be that we talk about 3-day trips, short breaks, great value, those sorts of messages. So this was one about paying less for family holidays. They want to make people smile. People are generally fed up with the problems of the world. So I don't know if people saw this campaign from the Norwegian Tourist Board. Eric the sheep, they put a webcam on Eric the sheep, and they did a whole series of campaigns called Sheep with a View. So you see the sheep going around the country with different types of sheep on boats, up mountains. It's hilarious. You can imagine how shareable this is. And it's so successful that loads of other tourist boards have copied it. So Scotland with Sheep with a View, Great Britain Sheep with a View, France Sheep with a View. I was talking to some of my Australian clients about it, and they wanted to create Roo with a View and strap one on a kangaroo. I said, you can't do that. But that's the sort of campaign, very different, but a great way to get people to see the countryside and get a sense of what the country's like, doing things differently. I love it. And the other way people are changing is because people are sharing so much content, then you want to see people enjoying themselves on holiday. And News International, which owns The Sun, The Times, now has an entire business called Storyful, which will find video coverage which is becoming viral. So if you remember anything you've shared recently which is viral coverage, there was one last year of a boy laughing in an aeroplane as he was being flown by his father, and it just made you laugh because the child was laughing so much. They watch for this viral coverage, and then they approach them and ask them to license the video work. So they pay them to use their content. So if you put something up that suddenly goes viral, you may get News International saying, please can we use that in advertising? And I'll send this through to you with a link so that you can see how it's used. But this is Dove doing a campaign for Father's Day. Instead of saying, and their campaign is all about enjoying life, instead of saying here's a shampoo or a wash or conditioner to use on Father's Day, they did a collection of viral videos saying Father's Day, Happy Father's Day, always care, you'll always be a hero to someone. And I wanted to cry when I'd watched this video. It made me feel very emotional. And all they're doing, instead of spending a lot of money on creating a beautiful looking advert, they're reflecting the wonderful creativity of the population of this world and creating a lovely story. So things like Storyful, not traditional marketing, but within a newspaper website building opposite our offices, are using this sort of clever creativity. And also people are not just doing PR and marketing and social, but they're combining them together. So Visit Sweden, which we work for, has some regions that don't have a website anymore. They just are trying to find their audience in the channels where those audiences are. So they're putting all their work into Facebook or Instagram. And we did a campaign with them with bloggers where we also bought some images from the bloggers and licensed it for advertising. And the campaign was all about the bloggers. Then we marketed it. We interviewed the bloggers so that they're on the tourist board website, so the links go back to the tourist board. And then we did native and social advertising, so it looked like editorial, but we'd paid for it, saying, you should, this is why, this blogger said this about this destination, and this is why you should consider it. So we're trying to direct people. We're not just expecting the blogger content to make people pick up and go. We're advertising around it. We're using that content to make people travel. And this content this was halfway through the campaign, 200,000 video views and 3,000 website visits, just halfway through the campaign. So when that's finished, I'll share some examples of what we've done, because we're just about to launch the video work that went around it too. And we use iAmbassador for the video work actually, but the others we've cherry-picked the individuals we've worked with. So just doing it differently, just thinking about how we pull it all together and drive those consumers. And we also are out there looking for opportunities, so seizing opportunities, not just waiting for them to come to us. So just one example for you, we saw that the London Design Museum in the UK was going to have an exhibition, which we weren't involved with, but we want to use it because those design museum readers are going to be our travellers. So we approached them, had a meeting, have done a digital competition with Times Online that's still running with that group behind the paywall, and it's only been up for a couple of weeks and it's there for a whole month. It's already had 33,000 entries, which is fantastic for a consumer competition. And you're behind a paywall with an engaged audience, and Design Museum is talking to all of their consumers. We're sharing it on 4 social channels so that we're getting to the media as well. So it's just an example of we're not waiting for them. We will, of course, also do other things with them, but that was just an example of doing something quick and creative around something. And we can do media buying for you. This was the content we wrote, and we can create those in the traditional channels but online. So those are some final examples of the sorts of things that we've done. So it's a difficult, complicated world, but we're out there hungrily looking for ways of working differently for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Noi li sentiamo qui in Bologna?
Potevamo collegarci col telefono? Oppure
Possiamo sentire.
We are just trying to understand if they have a question from
Okay.
Bologna and from Rome. And from Rome.
You're looking at sheep with a view.
Non so se Elisa si sta sentendo. Sì, siamo qui. Ah, ok.
You'll be obsessed by...
Se avete delle domande vi tolgo il muto. Anzi, dovete toglierlo da solo. Se avete delle domande da fare. Elisa, Gianluca, Silvia e Walter. Spero l'abbiate sentito abbastanza. Se avete delle domande potete togliere il muto e se avete un microfono potete farle che poi le ascoltiamo qua. Aspetta, Prova a parlare?
Ti senti?
Wow, yeah.
Sì, ti sentiamo forte e chiaro.
Ok, bene. No, direi che non abbiamo grosse domande, siamo rimasti piacevolmente sorpresi di scoprire
Elisa, sorry, switch to English. Switch to English. Elisa, switch to English, please.
Okay, yes. We don't have specific questions, but we are glad to discover the Ferrari exhibition in London. We didn't know it. So, content share on social. So thank you.
You're
and
welcome.
interesting data about the use of social for us and also of online magazines. So,
yeah, it's very interesting to know about the online magazine, the activity we could do about online magazine and with digital influencers, which can be, I don't know, I think they are the same category, but we could think to, I don't know how can I say, they are different, so we can organize some specific action and activities and projects dividing the online magazine and digital influencers.
yeah,
Yeah, because they are very influential. If you wanted to chat about it once you've thought about it, I'd be happy to give you a call or Skype or something and we could talk specific ideas.
That would be great.
Yeah?
No, I don't have any particular ideas at the moment, but in my opinion, we could, it's the same category, of course, because it's the digital world, but the activities and projects, I mean, should be divided and focused on a part about online magazines and a part about digital influencers, which are two different categories inside the same area, if that's what I mean.
Yes, there are different people to talk to and
But it's
different
the same
opportunities.
world.
Exactly. So focusing on it and sharing it.
Connected, it's the same area, the same world, but they are different.
Yes, so so we can share.
That's all. So we need to think about it.
Mm.
Great. Well, I'm very happy to talk to you again separately if that would help.
Okay. Sorry, I can't hear you very well, but yes, this is our opinion.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please.
I wasn't here at the beginning, so I'm sorry, but I didn't hear what you said or what you explained. Just a question from one side. There are some particular topics which are very useful for us communicating, and they could be global, maybe environment, or something else even. Because I didn't see if you talked about topics or some particular topics
Areas
which are
of
very, very actual, very not, which are very not actual, which are at the moment.
Some trends.
trends, what people are looking for in their holidays. There is a continuation of the trends you all know and love, passion about food, massive move to healthy eating in the UK, huge growth in vegan and vegetarian restaurants, which I know is not necessarily something we focus on. Food is a very big motivator for travel, and people are obsessed with the next trend. So we've moved from avocado on toast to should we cook the avocado stones and put them into a paste and eat them. People are very obsessed with the next healthy thing. All of the things that we know and love at experiential travel are very much a focus. People don't want to go and just see, they want to experience it, so they want to eat the pasta, they want a pasta lesson. All of those things are continuing. There's a term which is coming up in the UK, which was talked about at the ILTM Luxury Conference, called transformative travel. So people want to feel not just experiencing it, but personally transformed by the experience.
Can you give us an example?
Instead of going to the mountains and sitting in the restaurant and looking at them, they want to have walked 6 peaks. They want to have sat with gorillas in Rwanda. They want to have done something that they can... It's a bit like my daughter and her surfboard. They want something to come back and say, I achieved this on my holiday. Not just I experienced it. They want to be able to say, I've done something really different. I haven't just bought a truffle from the market. I've actually gone out and picked them up and smelt them in the woods. So actually truffle hunting, even as a small example, is so different to what people would normally do. It's much more active.
So we could suggest a Grand Tour, a modern Grand Tour.
Yes,
Like,
yeah.
the past centuries.
Yes, the grand tour of it. Yes. I couldn't point to one trend which I think is radically new, but I think all the trends are getting even more granular. So instead of advertising to age groups, people are now advertising to attitudes. There's a radio program on the UK called Radio 4, which is the intelligent conversation, and they used to market to the 50-plus audience. They don't anymore. They market to people's interests. So they appeal to intelligent people rather than trying to appeal to 50-plus. And their audience has massively escalated because they're not thinking in demographic terms, they're thinking in attitudes. So the digital space gives you so much content, you can find attitudes rather than age profiles. We work for the ferry industry in the UK. We promote 10 ferry crossings. We want people to think about taking a ferry rather than flying. And in the past, we've targeted young people, families, old people. This year, we're targeting cyclists, motorists, campers. Doesn't matter how old they are, because they can put their bikes on the back of their cars, and that gives them a reason. The ferry is the enabler. So we're just shifting the marketing to really very, very focused on that particular group We've identified that there are 7 million cyclists. We've done the sort of market sizing, so we know we're going for a big enough audience to spend the focus time on it, and really being granular. So I think it's, the themes are there, but people are being more niche about how they attack them. Yeah. And sustainability is a massive issue in the UK at the moment. I'm a trustee of a sustainable charity. I've judged the World Travel Market Responsible Tourism Awards for the last 5 years. It's an area I feel particularly strongly about. But now I feel we've reached a public tipping point in the UK where people don't just expect it to happen, they want to know it's happening. And I've had journalists in the last year coming back from a hotel saying it was a beautiful luxury hotel, but they wasted plastic and paper and energy, and I'm not going to stay there again. And actually the front page of this, there's a big focus on plastics because of David Attenborough's Blue Planet, where people saw wildlife being affected by so much plastic. So now front page of the paper, plastic free. People at parties are saying don't use a plastic straw because that will damage the environment. I don't want to see a turtle suffocated with a plastic straw. So that actually is a really important area for the future. And journalists are asking questions. There's a new company called Boutico, which was set up by a former journalist, which is promoting sustainable boutique properties so people can actively find people who are being proactively social. So that feels like a big... I feel like I've been banging this drum for so long, I'm almost surprised that people are doing it. I'm really excited. I think that's going to be good for the future.
And do you think this is a UK trend or is it a global trend?
I couldn't say. I know the Blue Planet in the UK had a massive emotional impact on people because they were shocked to see what had happened to the ocean, because you just don't see it. So I think that was a tipping point domestically. I don't know globally. Don't know.
Are they able to find Emilia-Romagna on a map?
No.
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 Bologna?
Maybe, but if I asked, it depends on your audience. If I had 100 people in a room, maybe 40 couldn't point to Italy. I'm not joking. People's physical sense of geography is really poor. It's somewhere around there. Is it that bit? Could you point to Cardiff? Cardiff. Could you point to Cardiff? Wales. Do you know where Tyneside is? Newcastle, yeah. Newcastle. So your knowledge of our geography is as bad as our knowledge is of your geography, but we're in Ireland, we're easier to point to, but people, I'm probably exaggerating, but don't underestimate ignorance. People don't necessarily see things with maps, visually with maps. So Google Maps, I think, has been a really interesting innovation in the way people see it. And are you on Snapchat? Have you seen Snapchat location? If you switch on Snapchat location, you can see where all your Snapchat friends are around the world with maps. So you can zoom in and see, oh, so-and-so's in America, where are they? And drill down and see all your friends in New York and get a sense of... So I think things like that are going to help us improve our understanding of the world, because we're actually looking at a map and seeing where people are on the world socially. It's very clever, bit scary. If you don't, I've turned it off. I don't want the world to see where I am. But my daughter uses it a lot. She switches on, and especially in the holidays when the university friends are all gone everywhere, she switches it on to see where all her friends are. She's on holiday, I'm going to see where she is. So if you think about that from a travel perspective, you can go in and find people you can actively go and look for people and see where they are and what they're doing. So I think that will help people's geography. I'm always looking for the opportunity as well as the problems. There's always said there are three things people either know nothing about you, or they know very little about you, or they know the wrong things about you. If people don't know anything about you, that's actually a big opportunity, because you haven't got to overcome a mistaken understanding. So yes, we have a big job to do to tell people about the region and why people should come here, but that's great, because we're not trying to change their opinion. They don't think it's a terrible, like Benidorm, they don't think it's somewhere terrible. They just don't know enough about it yet.